If you want fast data on your smartphone when you're not able to use Wi-Fi, then what you want is LTE, and I've been testing it. Hi, this is Walt Mossberg from the Wall Street Journal, and the big news today, compared to just a few years ago, is that you can get fast LTE from all four major U.S. smartphone carriers, cellular carriers. Whereas just a few years ago, if you were talking LTE, you really were talking about Verizon Wireless. They pioneered widespread distribution of LTE in this country. They still have the largest network, though AT&T is closing in on them. And when I first tested and explained LTE, which stands for long-term evolution, I really was talking only about Verizon. So given the fact that the other guys are now in the race, I decided to do a non-scientific test just in the last month or so where I happen to be using the latest major smartphone that supports LTE and supports all four carriers, and that would be the iPhone 5S. I got one from each of the carriers to borrow, and went around to 3 different places, used the same speed test app, one that's very standard for reviewers like me, and did 20 speed tests on each phone in each location. And this is what I found. First, AT&T was the winner with about a speed of about 19 megabits per second, actually a little more than that. And that was the first time I had ever done an LTE test that AT&T had won. So they've been claiming they have the fastest network using much more scientific studies than mine, but my study also confirmed that. However, AT&T's speed was mostly due to a stupendous performance in Midtown Manhattan, one of my testing locations, where they just creamed the other 3 guys. They actually didn't do that great in the other 2 locations, which were the DC suburbs and the heart of Silicon Valley. Number 2 was Verizon, which has the most experience and the broadest network. And even though Verizon didn't win outright any of the locations I tested in, Verizon was the most consistent. It did not have super high highs or super low lows. It tended to cluster between about 15 megabits per second and a little over 18. So I would say it was its consistency was a big point in its favor. What about the 2 guys who weren't even in the LTE business not that long ago? Well, there was a big difference between them. T-Mobile turned in a respectable performance of 13 megabits per second and change. It won one of my tests. It was pretty weak in another one of them. And of course, its network footprint, as well as Sprint's, is smaller than Verizon or AT&T. But where I was testing, it did pretty well. Sprint, on the other hand, was more problematic. I had trouble getting a Sprint LTE signal in 2 of my 3 locations, and had to leave the location and go somewhere in the immediate radius until I found a Sprint LTE signal. And it averaged only a little over 10 overall. In fact, it was hard enough to find a Sprint LTE signal in a 4th location that I had to scrap a test. This was in downtown San Francisco, and even though the hotel I was in a very central location, I could not get a Sprint LTE signal there. When I walked around, I could not get one, or I could get one, but it didn't register in any significant way on the testing app, and so Out of fairness, I didn't try to do the test there. But the bottom line is, if you want fast LTE now, you don't have to only go to Verizon. Your results may vary from mine, but you can get reasonable LTE speeds from the other carriers. This is Walt Mossberg, and I'll see you next week.